Have you ever woke up in the middle of a dream and the dream was so interesting that you wanted to go back to sleep to see the end of it? If so, what was the dream? Was exploring a jungle with a group of, I assume, friends. We ended up discovering some kind of temple, but it was dark so we decided to set up camp. I was charged with gathering dry wood and leaves for the fire. While mucking my way through vines, I heard my name being screamed by one of the group members in a terrified way, repeatedly. Woke up to see my mom yelling my name and to get the fuck up already. I never found out what that temple was. Edit, I have never watched any adventure movies like Indiana Jones or Jumanji, nor have I played any Uncharted game. When I wake up in the morning, I usually have 30 more minutes before I have to actually get out of bed. If I'm having a dream before I wake up and I go back to sleep, I can usually continue the dream. Last night I had a dream that I was in some kind of resort, Jurassic Park-like area. I went back to sleep this morning and managed to get into a relationship with a pretty hot dude who was working at the resort. I learned I could fly, but I had to teach myself. Woke up right as I was gearing up for the big test to see how high I could go. Forced myself back to sleep and let me tell ya, flying in a dream is way too fucking fun. A few months before I got married I had a dream where Bill Murray was attending my wedding and asked to make a toast. I happily agreed. Then, before I could hear the toast, I woke up. Not one single dream but often I'll dream that I've met a girl that I'm madly in love with, and when I wake up I feel like I've lost a soulmate. Really strange and sort of depressing. I was once in the middle of a dream sitting in the back seat of a car with my brother next to me in the back and my two sisters in the front. At some point I realized I was dreaming and I said something off script from the dream, and suddenly all the other people in the car were just slowly turning towards me with just pure dark holes where their faces were. That fucked up my day. I had a dream where I was riding ATVs with some friends and we came across this house that was under construction. We played some games and then went to sleep. In the dream I woke up and saw a pair of legs swinging through a gap near the floor in the unfinished wall, and knew instantly that I was just sleeping next to a suicide victim. I was filled with such a feeling of dread. I think it's the most vivid thing I've ever felt in a dream. I once dreamt that all of my family and closest friends were on the world's largest cruise ship. Along the way, we somehow were exposed to radioactive waste that gave us all superpowers or other mutations. I remember so vividly being able to use my mind to move objects with ease, and I threw donuts at my brother, whose skin had turned as hard as stone. This one girl on the cruise that we all universally hated, for reasons I can't remember, received a really random and useless mutation. She grew a really fat lizard tail, like a leopard gecko who has eaten a lot lol. She was crying about how ugly she was now and all we could do was laugh. Then I woke up. The guy was in a coma and he dreamed that he continued life for decades, finding a wife, having kids, etc. until one day he was looking at a lamp in his house and it seemed off. He couldn't place it and continued to stare at it, and as it got weirder it pulled him out of his coma. Once he realized none of it was real he got super depressed. Very sad story on Reddit. I used to have lucid dreams in my early to mid-20s. As soon as I'd realize I was asleep, I'd start flying or just rising to the ceiling because it was a cool way to test it. Then my immediate thought would be WHO should I pretend sleep with? And the excitement of that possibility woke me up every damn time. If you come in your dreams you come in real life. A long time, I had a dream that there were ghosts living in my family's garage. Nowhere else, just the garage. I somehow became friends with one, but she was unable to speak to me, leave the property that the house was on, and wasn't able to show any facial expressions that wouldn't be considered terrifying. Me and my ghost friend were playing on the house porch and two guys were trying to break into the house. She tried to stop them by scaring the living heck out of them by making a terrifying face and screaming the most blood-curdling scream ever right in their faces. I wasn't able to see the face she made, but I somehow knew it was there, and all I could hear was the scream. The people trying to rob the house ran off, but instead of celebrating, I curled up and started crying because of how terrifying the scream was. I absolutely loved that ghost, and I forgot that her whole purpose was to scare people, but she did it to protect me in the house. I still cry though, and she tried to cheer me up the best way she could. Then I woke up. I knew that was a dream, but I didn't want to leave my ghost friend alone, knowing the last time she saw me was when she scared me to tears by accident. I tried to go back to sleep, and I did, and I somehow successfully re-entered the dream, only it was several years in the future. The garage still had a couple of ghosts in it, but not nearly as much, and the rest seemed to be oblivious to humans. I was going into the attic and found some pictures in there of me around the age I was friends with the ghost, and on a picture I saw a very faint image of her face standing next to me. I went down the attic and woke up. I didn't get to tell the ghost that I forgive her or anything, and I still feel some sort of emotional attachment to her. It was probably the best nightmare I've ever had, and one of the dreams I've wanted to go back to the most, just so I can tell her that there are no hard feelings. I dreamt that I was part of some Eastern European resistance movement who had to speak in code and hide out in abandoned manors in the forest to plan our attacks against some fascist regime. We enlisted the Pope to help us, but when we went to meet him he has double-crossed us because the regime we were fighting somehow knew the Pope was gay and was going to tell everyone. I woke up then, not knowing if my resistance group was executed, or if we escaped somehow. I call it my gay Pope dream. I have a story about when the opposite of this happened. It was a fucking epic fantasy dream. Let me tell ya. Evil wizard of some sort that I'm pretty sure was my 8th grade math teacher, kidnapped Princess, a worthless but snappy sidekick that was my best friend IRL. This dream had everything. So I beat the bad guy, rescued the princess and brought her back to a village of, I think Ewoks or something, I dunno. Big celebration, everybody went hooray and stuff, and then it didn't end. We just kinda stood there looking at each other. It felt like a long time. Ewoks just kinda start milling around and doing their everyday shit. Made some small talk with the princess. And then eventually the dream ended and I woke up. It was a strange one. This reminds me of one of my favorite dreams. I don't necessarily remember what most of the dream was, but I do know that I was volunteering at this large place. My alarm clock in real life started to ring and at first everyone in the building was shocked. We questioned whether it was a fire alarm or something else, and then I came to the conclusion, oh, that's my alarm clock. This is a dream. But instead of waking up I told the people I was working with that I had to leave because it was time for me to get up. I took whatever I was working on and I went over to put it down, said bye to everyone there, and woke up just as I opened the front doors of the building. I had a nightmare a couple of years back, and I still remember some bits. I was in a city where there was an outbreak of a disease. Infected people would start leaking black stuff from their eyes and noses and attack non-infected people. For some reason, I was walking in a part of the city that was completely deserted a couple days after the outbreak. Very faintly I heard someone crying. I approached and found out that it came from a backyard. If I wanted to see who it was, I had to climb a high fence. When I walked into the backyard I was fucking horrified. There was a crying little kid, like 3 years old on a leash, tied to a pole. I didn't dare to approach, because that child was leaking Valk stuff from the nose. I woke up after this, and was still horrified. The parents had to leave their child who was still alive, chained to a pole outside. That fucked me up for a couple of days. I had a nightmare about being a teenage girl with a group of friends on bikes hiding from and hunting down a shadow monster that killed dogs, and we tracked it down to some abandoned house and tried to rescue the dogs, but one of the dogs started barking and I had to try and calm it down before the monster came and got us, and my friend screamed from another room but Then I woke up and I will never know if those dogs survived. This is also the opposite, but one time I had a dream that I was in my hometown airport, a pretty big one, when suddenly a shooting started happening down the terminal. I used to work at an airport, so I found the nearest worker and had them open the nearest door out onto the tarmac. We started evacuating people as the shooting came closer. Somehow I was the last person to go through the door. When I reached the tarmac, there wasn't a single person in sight. Even the noises from inside the airport had stopped. Up above me the clouds were blacker than night, and purple lightning was striking frequently. As I walked out into the middle of the tarmac staring into the heavens, airplanes started crashing down all around me very cinematically. Honestly, the sight took my breath away, and not in a good way. It was very dreadful and dramatic. I can still see it in my head if I focus. I woke up just as a 737 crashed right on top of me. I have a pretty crazy imagination. I had a dream that I had a bunch of birds and snakes just living in my kitchen. They were my pets, and I was cuddling my snakes on the couch, watching Netflix while my birds were chilling out, flying on top of my fridge and stuff. It was a great dream, and it was so vivid that when I was waking up, I thought, crap. I left my snakes on the couch out with the birds. I hope they didn't eat one of the birds. I was disappointed when I came back to my senses and there were no animals in my home, but relieved that I wasn't such a negligent pet owner that my imaginary snakes ate my imaginary birds. I once dreamt that people all over the world were finding identical strangers. Shortly afterwards one of the two would go missing. In my dream an old friend told me that whatever is causing these disappearances was located in downtown Toronto. So myself and a small group of friends, some real, some made up, there were around 8 of us, convince a school bus driver to drive us to downtown Toronto. I woke up before we got there. I still don't know what was causing these disappearances.